Massive protests again in Melbourne as Australians really start to wake up to the fact that something just isn't right with all of this. Jordan Peterson tries to unwrap the psychology of COVID hysteria with Dave Rubin.
Canadians who aren't vaccinated now cannot leave the country.
Yeah.
What the hell? Why is that?
And Campbell Newman walks us through the Lib Dems' plan to save Australia as he joins me live in the Other Side studio.
Yeah. The boss, the Prime Minister, says
Yeah.
It's not compulsory. So why won't he speak? More importantly, why won't he act? Why won't he shut down these states? He says you don't have to get vaccinated. It's not compulsory. There is no mandate, but he's allowing the states to do it.
It's a big show. Stay with us. G'day and welcome to episode 75 of The Other Side Australia with Damian Coory, your weekly dose of sanity from the sensible centre-right of actual liberals who care about liberty. Jordan Peterson has done an incredibly insightful sit-down interview with US commentator Dave Rubin this week as the two try to understand the psychology behind some of the irrational reactions to COVID that we've been seeing in the more woke Western countries like Canada and Australia.
I talked to a senior advisor to one of the provincial governments a couple of weeks ago. He told me flat out that the COVID policy here is driven by nothing but opinion polls related to the popularity of the government. No science, no end game in sight, no real plan. And so what that means is that the part of the population that's most afraid of COVID, I know it's 50% of Democrats believe that you have a 50% shot at getting hospitalized if you catch COVID, and 25% of Republicans. And so I suspect it's similar in Canada. And so policy is being driven by people who are more afraid than they should be. And it was a very disheartening conversation because I trust this guy and he knows what he's talking about. And so, I wouldn't say I'm cynical about governments exactly, because cynicism it's a cheap shortcut to approximating wisdom, let's say. And you have to be judicious in your criticisms. But I still found that extremely disheartening because I thought at least policies that I don't agree with, the restrictive policies, were at least driven by something remotely resembling a scientifically informed plan.
That's Dr. Jordan Peterson speaking about the Canadian response to COVID, but the situation is 100% the same right here in Australia. Every border closure, mask mandate, vax mandate decision that they make is all about politics. It's all about the federal election that's coming sometime in the next 6 months. The battleground states for the next federal election are Queensland and Western Australia. They will be the main states that will count and the ones that all the political parties will be putting their energy into. The Liberal Party are putting their national campaign headquarters in Brisbane. And you can predict how it's going to play out. Labor Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk and Western Australian Labor Premier Mark McGowan, who both in the last 12 months just got put back in power with huge mandates for their tough shut the borders stance on COVID, they're going to pick a fight with ScoMo. It'll be over opening the borders or allowing international flights in, and then they'll do the only thing they're good at, manipulating our not-so-smart fellow Australians into falling for their state of origin style parochialism. We won't let Canberra tell Western Australians what to do. We run our own state here in Queensland. That stuff works. It works very well. It worked well for Labor in both those state elections. And thinking Aussies, we have to do our bit. We have to wake up our unthinking relatives and friends to the reality of this blatant manipulation by Labor PR guys and gals. It's not just the Labor premiers though. When you look at the rules like New South Wales public health orders that say things like this: unvaccinated people must be seated to consume alcohol in indoor areas. Alcohol may be consumed by fully vaccinated people who are not seated. And this one, I just love this one. Singing and dancing indoors is permitted for fully vaccinated people. Unvaccinated people must not sing and dance in indoor areas. Folks, we are, I'm out of words. I really am. And that's, people who know me would say, that's extremely rare. I'm out of words to describe what is going on here, the ridiculousness of this. How did we get to a point culturally in Australia where we've got bureaucrats sitting down in front of their little computers, tapping out rules about vaccinated people being allowed to dance and unvaccinated people not being allowed to dance? This is totalitarian insanity. And if you think it's anything less, you are bonkers. And the left in this country, I know none of the left or very few of the left watch this show, but please try to ask your leftist friends, as I'm doing every single day I can, what is going on with the left in Australia? What is going on with your thinking around government and your thinking around COVID and the logic of your thinking? Things are just getting way too creepy for words. You do not, in a free country like Australia is supposed to be, you do not ever, ever write rules and regulations telling people when they can dance and sing and drink alcohol. Period. Okay? You just don't do it. Okay? So the fact that there's even a bureaucrat sitting down in front of their computer at work, tapping this out, and it's going up the line to higher and higher bureaucrats, and then it's going to the ministers. The fact that that culture exists that even permits that to occur is scary enough, right? We really need to take a very clear look at what's going on inside our government bureaucracies and our public service and what's going on inside our political system. But the fact that this can get up to ministerial level, it can get up to the level of very senior bureaucrats and the most senior of our political leaders and not get questioned in the Labor Party is astounding. The fact that it's happening in a Liberal Party is astounding. I mean, I'm out of superlatives, as I said. I've got no other way to express this but to say that we are in serious trouble. This isn't just a matter of, oh, we need to just switch from Liberal to Labor, or we need to, have a slight change of factions inside the Liberal Party or inside the Labor Party. We are in massive trouble culturally as a country, and we've got to reflect on how we got here. How did we get from a country that respected freedom, that respected individuals having a go, the concept of a fair go, getting out and doing something, the concept of mateship, of entrepreneurial spirit and drive and inspiration, all the things that have made Australia great over the years and have turned Australia into this fantastically wealthy country that it is. How did we go from that to a country where we've got bureaucrats telling us when we can sing and dance? And there's not even any science. Don't think that there's like health science behind this. There's no health science behind that. That's the most ridiculous, irrational, unjustifiable nonsense that you could possibly conceive. And I'll challenge any statistician and any scientist and any medical official to sit down and debate that, because this is unjustifiable. There's nothing in there except nonsense that bureaucrats have just amplified to have control over us. So I can't believe how far off the cliff Australia's fallen. I definitely can't believe how far off the cliff the Liberal Party has fallen. I am that far from running for politics, and I think we've got to really turn this around. It's just absolutely crazy. So we need a radical change at this federal election. We need to shock the major parties to their core to get this change. And the only way to do that, folks, is to vote for the minor parties, big time, okay? We have preferential voting. Your vote will never be wasted, but we've got to start voting for the minor parties. So this is very clear. I mean, this is an indication of the Liberal Party, for those of us on the centre-right side of politics. The party is in crisis. Just how much they've lost their soul. I mean, this is Dominic Perrottet. Dominic Perrottet is supposed to be from the right of the party. He's supposed to be a true free market, freedom-loving liberal. He's not from the left of the party, not the modern liberals. So if even someone like Perrottet is signing off on bureaucratic insanity like that, then, as I said, we're in a far worse state than even I imagined we could be as a nation. The only answer now is the minor parties, which is why we will be speaking to Campbell Newman about the Liberal Democrats' plan to save Australia in depth shortly. But back to Dr. Peterson and Dave Rubin.
So what does that tell you just at a psychological level about fear in general? If this isn't driven by science and people hear things on the media and then suddenly they say, okay, yes, please lock me in my house. Please keep me in a mask forever. Please keep me not going to holidays with my family. Just psychologically, has that unearthed anything that maybe you thought wasn't as intense?
I think the thing that surprised me the most probably was how rapidly we stampeded to imitate a totalitarian state in the immediate aftermath of the release of COVID.
Yep, we did.
No one really knew how serious the virus was going to be, and so it was an unknown threat. The cost of overreacting to a threat is generally minimal compared to underreacting to a real threat, right? Overreacting to a hypothetical threat is cheap compared to underreacting to an actual threat. Because if you underreact, you can die. Whereas if you overreact, you generally just get tired for a minute. So a herd will stampede because the most neurotic member of the herd jumps first, and then they'll instantly follow them. And that's kind of what we did in the early stages of the pandemic. The Chinese acted first. Now, unfortunately, they are a totalitarian state, and we all followed. And that's excusable in some sense because we didn't know what sort of threat we were facing.
Yes, back in early 2020, it was all very understandable. But as we approach 2022, we need a new way of thinking. Dr. Peterson goes on to explain how much the Canadian situation is like ours here in Australia. The lack of free movement and speech, he says, is horrifying, as are the vaccine mandates.
I have family members who aren't vaccinated for health reasons, who also had COVID twice and didn't really feel they needed to be vaccinated again. In any case, it's extraordinarily annoying to see this happening and to then find out that there's nothing behind it except like the most instrumental and cowardly random polling is extremely disheartening and also maddening and also angering, all of those things at once. You know, Canadians who aren't vaccinated now cannot leave the country. Yeah. Like, what the hell? Why is that? And look, I got vaccinated and people took me to task for that. And I thought, all right, I'll get the damn vaccine. Here's the deal, guys. I'll get the vaccine. You fucking leave me alone. And did that work? No. So stupid me. You know, that's how I feel about it. It's like, well, now I have to get tested for COVID when I come back into Canada. I have to get tested before I leave Canada. Well, why to get the vaccine then if you're not going to leave me alone? And I don't think the evidence that unvaccinated or that vaccinated people are less contagious, let's say, I don't think it's very compelling.
Yeah.
So why are the unvaccinated all of a sudden a danger? And I certainly don't understand the push to get children vaccinated. I think that's absolutely reprehensible.
Dr. Peterson also says he's baffled why the pharmaceutical industry, Big Pharma, one of the least trusted industries in the world, according to independent research, is suddenly the favorite industry of the political left.
I see the leftists, all of a sudden, it's like Big Pharma. Yeah, trust them. It's like, what? What? Really? You guys? I don't understand that at all. And psychologically, so what's going on here? It's like, well, I think the underlying phenomenon is something like, well, as long as it's for health and safety, it's always good. And, you know, not to get conspiratorial here, but the same damn thing is going to happen with the climate change push.
Absolutely.
It's already being reconfigured as, well, it's the biggest public health issue of our time. It's like, no, I don't think so. I think overreaching bureaucrats are the biggest health, the biggest challenge to our health of our time.
Gold, as always, from Dr. Jordan Peterson. Overreaching health bureaucrats are the biggest challenge to our health of our time. Indeed. This, folks, is a political crisis. It's not a medical crisis anymore. Dr. Peterson speaking with Dave Rubin on the Rubin Report there. And now the longer version of that clip is available on the Rubin Report YouTube channel, but I think it's time to start perhaps steering people to channels that really do respect free speech. So I'm going to suggest that you hop on to Locals, and watch the full interview and support Dave Rubin's work. The link to that will be in our program notes. Coming up, as I said, former Queensland Premier and the Lib Dems lead Senate candidate for Queensland in the coming federal election, Campbell Newman, will be joining me in the Other Side studio for a deep dive on the Liberal Democrats' new Freedom Manifesto, which they've just released for the 2022 federal election. Okay, well, a bit of news from us now. The Other Side will be sadly leaving the Discernible platform at the end of 2021 and returning in 2022 on our own platforms, as well as with a bit of a big announcement that we can't talk about just yet. So right now, please follow me on Twitter at OtherSideOz. That's at OtherSideOz, AUS, and or on Facebook at facebook.com/TheOtherSideOz, AUS. So The Other Side Oz on Facebook. Now, you can also just search us up on Facebook, but make sure you put in The Other Side and Australia, or The Other Side and Damian Coory. And Coory spelt Coory. Then be sure, once you get there, to click follow on Twitter to follow us, so you make sure that you will see us. And also, when you get to Facebook, make sure that you click the like button to like the page so that you get information. The Facebook page looks like what you're seeing on the screen right now. Now, we do strongly recommend that you continue to follow Discernible, of course, on YouTube and Facebook. But if you're landing on a page that says Discernible and you're looking for The Other Side, it isn't our own separate page. So you have got to find our separate pages to be sure that you stay in contact with us after the end of 2021. Then if you could kindly subscribe to us also on YouTube. Our YouTube page looks like this. And again, you'll need to find our page, not our folder on Discernible's page, and make sure that you subscribe to our page and click the bell so that you get notified when we put up new content. We really look forward to keeping in touch throughout 2022. And don't forget that you can always join our VIP WhatsApp list and have the show link sent to your phone every week. Just drop us an email at theothersideost@gmail.com, theothersideost with a T at gmail.com, and we'll send you the link to opt in on WhatsApp. Right, very important that we stay in touch throughout 2022 because we will be having a big announcement when we return in late January. But we'll be doing shows right through until the end of December, right here on Discernible and the Other Side platforms. Campbell Newman coming up in a moment, but first, some harsh words from China this week and a stern warning to Australia that we would be heavily attacked if we helped America in any fighting that might erupt if China invades Taiwan. The threat was made by the Chinese Communist Party government through its mouthpiece English language newspaper's editor, Hu Xixin. Mr. Hu is the editor-in-chief of the Global Times newspaper, and on Friday he tweeted this: "If Australian troops come to fight in the Taiwan Straits, it is unimaginable that China won't carry out a heavy attack on them and the Australian military facilities that support them. So Australia better be prepared to sacrifice for Taiwan Island and the US." China uses the term Taiwan Island because it claims Taiwan is not a free, separate nation, but still a part of communist China. All of this follows an interview that our Defence Minister Peter Dutton did with the Australian newspaper this week. In it, Mr. Dutton said China had been very clear about its intentions to go into Taiwan. He didn't say openly that Australia would commit to defend Taiwan, but the newspaper says he strongly implied the support would be given to the United States should it mount a defence. Mr. Dutton said that China is an economic and military superpower. They spend 10 times a year more than what we spend on our defence budget. And every 18 months, they produce, on a tonnage rate, more by way of military assets than the entire Royal Navy has in her fleet. So the thought that we could compete with China is, of course, a nonsense. That's not the question before us. The question is, would we join with the US? It would be inconceivable that we wouldn't support the US in an action if the US chose to take that action. And again, I think we should be very frank and honest about that. Look at all of the facts and circumstances without pre-committing. And maybe there are circumstances where we wouldn't take up that option. I can't conceive of those circumstances. So said Defence Minister Peter Dutton to the Australian newspaper this past week. For analysis and an explanation of the Taiwan, China, Australia situation, check out my interviews with Professor Joe Siracusa in episodes 42 and 44 of The Other Side. We'll put the links in the program notes, or you can just go to the full episodes here playlist on The Other Side Australia's YouTube channel, where you get all of our episodes. Welcome back, everybody. We have very special guests in the studio this afternoon. Former Queensland Premier and former Lord Mayor of Brisbane, Campbell Newman. Campbell, thank you for your time.
Great to be with you, Damian.
Good to have you here. So, Campbell, before we get into the Freedom Manifesto, which is what I want to talk about today, it's a policy of about 10 different policies or 10 different policy concepts. So we'll have a look at some of those. We probably won't get through all 10 of them, but we'll have a look at a few. But basically, I wanted to talk to you a little bit, first of all, about your history and what it was like being Premier of a state, because I don't think there's too many people who've been Lord Mayor of a city and Premier of a state. What is it like when you wake up the day after an election and realise, holy whatever, we've won? Yeah.
Yeah, well it's an awesome responsibility, quite surreal. You feel in some ways that you've walked onto some sort of movie set and you're it, but reality soon confronts you that it's really very, very serious, and it's a bloody big deal. It really is, of course. Yeah. And it's relentless. You're constantly on the move, in meetings, being briefed, having to read stuff, sign stuff, do media appearances, make decisions. It just goes on and on, 7 days a week for the entire time that you're in office. There really isn't much let up at all. Yeah,
but you've got a massive organisation, right? That just happens. And it's
for example, Premier of Queensland, roughly 200,000 public servants that are in the organisation that you're overseeing with the ministry, and there's an enormous number of issues. There's issues, of course, that you campaign on, that you go to the people on. You've got to fix something or change something, reform something, deliver something. Those are all things you're trying to do. But meantime, there are all sorts of issues that must be dealt with as you go, that come up because they have to be solved. Reports that about some problem somewhere in the state on a particular matter, and you can't walk past them. You've got to deal with them as well as the things that you're elected, or you said you wanted to do if you're elected.
So what made you want to get back into politics? And in particular, I know we covered this the last time we spoke, but just as a quick recap.
Well, look, this might sound
how are you feeling now?
This might sound a bit odd, but look, I've got a great business. I've got business partners I love working with and staff that are just terrific. And it's with heavy heart that I put myself back into the political fray. But I'm doing it because I feel so passionately about Australia's heading right off the rails. I see it as basically a continuation of my public service. I didn't want to do this again. Absolutely, that's the fair income sort of situation. But I feel I have to make a contribution and take a stand. And that's why I've been really pleased to be involved in the Liberal Democrats and things we'll talk about in a moment. Yeah,
and it wasn't possible to do it within the current structure of the Liberal parties we'll discuss in a moment. It seems that they've only moved further away from the core classical liberal values since you made the first decision to jump a few months ago.
Well, you can try this, mate. You can go to the Liberal Party website, you can look at their statement of values, and you can start to go through. And I challenge people who are watching to do this. There are many things that they're just paying lip service to, some stuff that they've completely abandoned. I mean, they're not the party of small government anymore. They're not the party of small business. They will make utterances to that effect, but they're not. They're just not. I mean, we'll talk about some of the things they've done as we go through this, and again, why the Liberal Democrats taking a stand on these issues. But I just think that if you really get down to this, you can't go beyond a comment that someone made to me when they were providing feedback on this document in the last 24 hours, and they said, look, gee whiz, this was something I thought the Liberal Party should have produced, but they're not anymore. Because what's in this, Damian, is real material. It's policy ideas of merit and substance and indeed controversy.
Yeah.
And I've been joking and saying to people, look, don't bother reading this if you want banal, dumbed down, focus grouped and safe.
Yeah.
These are issues that we're putting on the table that will make a difference in Australia. And some of them, yes, will be controversial, but they need to be debated. And that's why we wanted to do it. And I think it's a very powerful document.
Have we reached a point in Australian politics where everybody's just so focused on the polling and the centre that everybody's going after the same thing? Everything's just getting neutralised to safe.
Yep.
And there's no real leadership, which is...
Well, look, the people are saying now, I think the electorate get it, that what's the difference between the two major parties, Labor and Liberal, and there's barely as in the old parlance, there's barely a cigarette paper of gap between the two parties. And sadly, almost the pitch from the Liberal Party now seems to be, look, we're not as bad as Labor. It would be worse with them. They'd tax you more, or they'd do this, or they'd do that. We won't do that. When you have a political class, when you have people who've only ever been involved in politics, ministerial offices, peak industry bodies or unions, then you've got trouble. And that's what we've got in the Labor, Liberal Party and National parties. We've got people who are of the political class. They're into the politics of politics, they're into polling, they're into focus groups, but they're not into leadership.
Is there an answer to that career politician problem, though? I mean,
well, we the voters need to start scrutinising the people who put up. We shouldn't be voting, for example, for people like Julian Simmons, who has never had a real job, has just been the member for Ryan, prior to that a councillor, prior to that a political staffer. I mean, that's all the bloke's done, yet he's the member for Ryan. People like Trevor Evans, the federal member for Brisbane, another guy like that. But there are plenty from the Labor Party I could name as well.
Yeah, gone through the unions.
Yeah, just the unions and whatever. They're just look at the Deputy Premier of Queensland, Stephen Miles. I mean, and is there any wonder what we've got? So as if you're not from this side of politics, at least when you're looking at candidates, say from the left. And of course, if you're interested in the Conservative side, the right, look at what they have done. Look at their CVs. Let's stop voting for these political hacks and get people who are prepared to engage in debate, who are prepared to take risks, who are prepared to have sort of a go at some of the big ideas. Because Australia's lost its mojo. Australia's lost its way. We're a rich country. We got rich because of iron ore, gas, coal and agriculture. And, people in some of our big cities have completely lost the plot where our bread's buttered, how we pay our way in the world. And we're just signing on to this net zero rubbish. So we bugger coal, bugger gas, and let's hurt agriculture. Well, let's hope the iron ore price stays up high for a while. And it ain't, by the way. So look, that's just a little bit of a snapshot. So the problem is, we need to start thinking about how to take Australia forward, how to make our way in a rather scary world now. And if you're watching and you're into climate change and net zero, whatever, that's fine. Everyone can have their views. But what things do we need to do in this country to encourage new businesses, true entrepreneurship, and things that will pay our way in the world? I can respect that. I can respect someone saying to me, look, I believe we should do something about climate change, but then putting up proposals that will actually involve the private sector providing new employment opportunities, new investment opportunities, rather than just saying the solution, as the major parties are saying, is more taxpayer dollars to create supposedly new industries that will save all these jobs. I don't believe that for a moment. That's just complete baloney.
Yeah. All right, well, let's go through it. So, Freedom Manifesto. Yeah. Let's start with climate change and energy, since you're there. The Liberal Democrats' position on climate change and net zero?
Well, I guess it's like this. The view of the party is that the rest. Sorry, if you believe in climate change, the solutions being put up are very destructive, and really, if you do want to make changes, then you should be doing it through market mechanisms, free market mechanisms, letting private enterprise provide the solutions. So we're saying, for example, that we should remove subsidies that are there. That we should have a level playing field in the electricity and the energy supply sectors, remove the subsidies, get rid of things like renewable energy target, take away the ban on nuclear power, and let cheap, affordable, reliable energy be put in place to take this country forward.
People say we've got to give the industry a kickstart, though, don't they?
Yeah, but that is the.
It's been a long kickstart.
That's the sort of the message of self-interested bodies that are and organisations that are looking for a government dollar, And look, another one I'd try on you is that often these days, particularly the left, say, nuclear power, it's too expensive. And my response is, well, we're not saying that nuclear power is going to get up. What we're saying is get rid of the ban. Yep. And then the private sector can put up proposals for nuclear power, probably small modular reactors, that have to be operated safely and carefully, etc., all the safety standards. But if they stack up, the private sector will do it. They can't do it while there's a ban. So for people who say it won't stack up, well, they've got nowhere to go when you actually talk about, the problem is the ban. So anyway, we're saying we shouldn't be picking sides in the energy debate. I personally love renewables. I've got solar panels at home. I've got a battery as well. I'm almost self-sufficient in terms of electricity consumption. So I have no problem with championing sustainability. That's a different issue. Yeah. But I don't believe we should be destroying the Australian economy on something that is not a level playing field globally, and we'll see our economy decimated, and importantly as well, developing nations not have the important energy resources they need to develop.
Well, that's one of the most sort of serious moral issues in relation to this, I think, is the fact that developing nations do need fossil fuel energy, or they're going to need some sort of decent transitional cheap energy, or they won't be able to develop. There's a serious
there is this big
poverty issue.
But by the way, just to then give you a personal position on climate change.
Yeah.
So this is a personal issue, and it is shared by many of my colleagues. But I put it to you like this: 15 years ago, I believed that we might be seeing climate change. What do I think today? Well, I'm very sceptical. So why is that? Well, I watched An Inconvenient Truth many years ago. When I was mayor, we planted 2 million trees. We took the council to be 100% green energy. Imagine 5,000 kilometres of roads in Brisbane with street lights that were all renewable energy. So we made some big moves on the sustainability front, which again I have no problem with. But all the predictions in that film basically failed to come to pass.
To fruition,
if I go further back, I can show you articles from Australian newspapers from 1987, 88, 89, 90. What did they say? 1 to 2 metre increase in sea level here on Moreton Bay in Brisbane. Hasn't happened. 1 to 2 degrees increase in global temperatures. Hasn't happened. No snow at the no ice at the North Pole. Hasn't happened. No skiable snow within 40 years. This was in 1989. Okay. Well, we've just had snow and it's November.
Can we afford?
I could go on. It's
Australia can't afford.
So my challenge to people is all the warnings that I read in my 20s in the newspapers in the late 1980s. All those warnings are exactly the same as the warnings today. The language has only got more hysterical, but the warnings were basically the same. It didn't come true within the time frame specified. Back then, I can show you articles where the scientists quoted by the media were saying that it was a 90% certainty of these things happening, 50,000 square kilometres of Australia's coastline being inundated, and it hasn't happened. So my position is we have every right to be sceptical about what the extent of any climate change may be. More importantly, though, for this discussion, we can be very sceptical about whether we should totally trash the Australian economy when the projections haven't come true. The science is settled, they say. Well, I say that's baloney. It hasn't been settled. It's still open to question.
Yeah, and there's a very large number of scientists on both sides who are incredibly credible and have a lot of very strong arguments still. Campbell, I want to talk about debt because I think this is one of the issues that we really have been abandoned on in Australia by both parties. It used to be that the Liberal Party was known as being quite conservative fiscally and would look after the debt and make sure that they paid the debt off, and that the Labor Party would spend. And so the pattern has been for a long time that Labor spends and then you get a Liberal government and then they fix the debt and then Labor comes back in again because all the hard work's been done and people are annoyed. And then, now you know this better than anyone because of what happened in Queensland. You made an attempt to rein in the debt, to bring the public service down to a size that was sustainable, and you were politically punished for that quite strongly. So it is probably little surprise that the Liberal Party would now be very cautious about too much restraint in spending, when it seems to be that the average Australian appreciates the spending and doesn't really see the cost. And funnily enough, it's the youngsters, right? And the youngsters are the ones who are going to have to pay this off.
Well, I don't subscribe to the idea that you can just go on printing money, because I'm a student of history and I've seen the impacts that that has had in the past globally. For a long time this year, I've been concerned, along with my team, in our business endeavours about inflation and higher interest rates. And guess what? It's all happening. If you prime the economy with massive amounts of money, if you're operating the printing presses, which is what's been happening both in the United States, Europe and in Australia, you will see inflation. And surprise, surprise. And I can tell viewers who may not have experienced this, have been young, but you don't want to be going back to where we were in the 1980s, where interest rates were, I'll just say it slowly for effect, interest rates, when Lisa and I borrowed for our first home, 15.5%, but that was a 1.5% lower in 1990 than the 17% of the previous year. True story. Why? Yeah. Because inflation was up to double digits. You don't want inflation. It really hurts the poor, and you know what? It benefits the rich. Those who have capital assets actually tend to do well. Those that are trying to get in the market are left behind. Their incomes don't keep up. So we don't want inflation, and reckless spending brings inflation. Now, I'm not saying that the Morrison government's engaged in reckless spending, but I am saying they could have been a lot more careful with what they've done. Example, JobKeeper payments to companies that made then massive profits, which they haven't had any clawback mechanism. Another example would be earlier on this year, I think around March, April, if memory serves me correct, where more money suddenly became available in the budget because the economy was doing better than expected, and Josh Frydenberg went and spent it, announced, straight away spent it, rather than clawing it back.
But that's what they get incentivised to do, right?
Well, it is, and I don't see any difference between the Liberal Party and the Labor Party now. I think the Liberal Party under Scott Morrison and Josh Frydenberg have taken out a fire hose and blasted out the philosophical foundations of the party on this issue. So what are the Lib Dems saying? We need to actually get back to balanced budgets. Ultimately, we've got to try and get there. Balanced budgets, lower taxes, sensible spending by government departments. Indeed, we're advocating, drum roll, I said it was controversial, we're saying federal government departments other than defence should see a 10% cut to their budgets. And you know what? There is money lying there everywhere. There's money being wasted every single day, every day of the week.
I've got friends in the public service who tell me as much. You wouldn't survive in the private sector.
Exactly. And look, for those who think, Newman's at it again, I say, it's not popular to say these things, but they're the right things to say. That's why they need to be said. But again,
you're one of the few people in politics today who is prepared to say these things that aren't popular. Yeah. And we're going to need that to save the country. We need someone to stand up and say,
I hope,
folks, we've got to do something about this.
I hope people do start to listen. It's like it is no different. It is no different to the family budget. Ultimately, you cannot keep spending beyond your means, bad things happen. Countries are a bit different, they control the currency, but again, there are adverse impacts. Inflation's one of the big ones that come when you flood an economy with money. By the way,
you can control the currency, but you can't, its value, right? It's about value creation, and it's about, you can't change the reality.
Well, it's about psychology, it's about sentiment, about how people view the currency. And what really troubles me with our political and bureaucratic class is that anybody in business, particularly in development and building and manufacturing, would have said in March this year that inflation was on the move. But if you go back and look at the record, the heads of organisations like the RBA and Treasury, the mandarins in Canberra kept saying it would only be temporary, it was transitional, it wasn't going to happen. Well, it is. It's happening now. And the figures out of the United States recently are a major shock. And again, I had the view, not being smart after the event, you could see it coming. Why didn't they? These people are paid more than you and I, mate.
Yeah.
And it's their job. They've got one job and they've already stuffed this up.
All right, I want to have a look at this chart because I saw it in the Freedom Manifesto and it really shocked me. And we'll put it on the screen now. It's a monster. It's a monster.
Pretty spectacular. So, I mean, this is why I'm saying, Damian, that, you think that during this period here, the Liberal Party just criticise Labor ad nauseum.
Yeah.
But look at it, sort of, the Liberal Party are the gold class, Olympic League spenders. Okay, again, they had COVID, but that doesn't have to keep going that way.
No.
And there's
here we've got John Howard's era, right? And so, in Costello, so that you've got the debt right down to zero. Labor come in, and then of course we had the financial crisis, you could argue, so there was a bit of escalation there.
But again, to be really scrupulous about this, the Liberal Party criticised the Labor government for the actions they took during that crisis.
Yeah.
And
we're not at 200 billion. That's the 200 billion line, right? And now we're heading for the trillion, which is the 1 million. So it's just extraordinary. $1 million. It's a lot of dollars. How long is it going to take to pay this off? I think it says in there that the interest bill is 35 billion. So let's say interest rates go from you can get money for about 1.5%, right? If it goes to 3%, which is not high. God forbid it should go up to 17. I mean, that's mortgage rates, but let's say it goes to 10. We're in real trouble.
Well, it's extraordinary. Of course, I think that in a way they want to see, inflation, maybe it's the dirty secret, helps erode the level of debt. I mean, Australia, after World War II, had a significant debt, but inflation during the economic boom years helped erode that and helped government pay it off. So,
bit of a sick way to pay it off.
Well, it is, because, again, it does hurt ordinary people
and savers. It punishes savers.
Exactly. But look, how do we get out of this mess? Well, there's initiatives in here that actually will really get the economy going.
So you're talking 10% budget cuts across the board except defence, aiming for ensuring that we have balanced budgets. I mean, would you go so far as to legislate, debt ceilings or zero? That there has to be. The budgets have to be balanced. I mean, is that?
I think it's just about getting. At this stage, there's no way the budget's going to be balanced for quite a long time.
No.
I mean, that's the bottom line. You can't just stop spending. I mean, that can create real great difficulties. But you've got to manage this. You've got to manage the deficit down to zero, and then you've got to start to erode the debt and bring it back and that sort of stuff. But again, I think the important thing is here that if we can reinvigorate the Australian economy, government revenue will grow. And this might be counterintuitive, but one of the things we've talked about in this is the need for tax cuts. We're proposing a flat tax of 20%, and that would kick in after the tax-free threshold of $40,000. So the first $40,000, totally tax-free. After that, it's a 20% flat tax, which has the benefits of simplicity. It removes a whole lot of administrative overhead, and also people playing with the system, fudging it, working it to try and get into different tax brackets and things like that. The other thing we're saying is the company tax bracket should be 20% as well.
Yep.
So then what's the implication of that? Well, there's no incentive to try and manage things between a company and personal income.
Yes, exactly. It's the same tax rate.
But the thing then is to give people the reward of their money. And then there's other initiatives about small business which actually will give this country a huge incentive for people to set up their own businesses, to employ people, to invest, to come up with new ideas.
God no, we don't want that.
And
Heaven forbid.
The counterintuitive thing is that then in growing the economy substantially more than the last 20 years, higher rates of growth, we fix this as well.
Right.
You can't tax your way
out of this.
Yeah. You've got to actually
stimulate the economy, create value.
You've got to stimulate the economy via letting people have the reward for the risks they take. And this country at the moment is very anti-business. John Ruddock quoted a figure yesterday when this was being announced. Back in the 1960s, I think the figure was about 26% of Australia's GDP was generated by small businesses. Today it's down to 9%, he says.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I haven't had a chance to check that, and my apologies, I've got it slightly wrong. But that just shows you that's an opportunity gap.
Well, I know a lot of small business people. I think we've had this discussion before too, about that have packed up and just gone to the beach. So it's too hard. Everywhere you turn, there's red tape. Everywhere you turn, and if you do, break through and get a little bit ahead or have a bit of a win, in comes the tax man, to swoop in and take that away from you.
Well, it is, and people, what the unions don't get, but sadly, and the Labor Party don't get, but now the coalition don't get, they've just given up, is that when you make a decision to employ someone today in Australia, it is a very momentous decision. If you get a bad apple, you have got yourself a world of hurt in terms of,
well, a big business can absorb it, right?
Well, a big business has overheads as well. Then, as a blooming HR department, which isn't, by the way, to look after employees' careers. It's there to protect the organisation. Small business faces the prospect of someone being a bad leaver or a bad apple who, might, sort of perform poorly, but then be unable to be sort of managed out of the organisation, might take you to some sort of tribunal, go away money having to be paid. Look, it is very difficult to employ people today. And for those who employ people and are watching, they know what I mean. For the political class, they don't know. They have no idea.
No, because they've never had to do it. They don't understand. They don't understand the pain of. I don't know a small business person who hasn't had sleepless nights worrying how they're going to make payroll or worrying about staff that aren't performing.
Well, I work with
and the impact that has on the good staff.
Yeah.
Right?
I work with a number of startups as a director, and we have to do things like some months the directors don't get paid. Because we're going to make payroll, we're going to pay the staff first, or pay our bills, rightfully pay the ATO our taxes.
Australia does have a very anti-business culture, though.
Oh, we do,
and it does. I didn't realise it till I lived overseas and then came back, but it's tremendously. It's just such a great disincentive to want to set up a business because nobody has any respect, in a sense. And if you do make money, you'll be frowned upon.
I knew the coalition had a problem, Damian, when they adopt the language of the left and started talking about wage theft.
Yeah, right.
Wage theft.
Yeah.
So leading figures in this government started talking about wage theft, and generally speaking, the cases were due to large organisations getting it wrong.
Mistakes.
The mistakes, which shouldn't have happened. But why did they happen? Because the system is too complicated.
Yeah.
And like a major Australian organisation, I'm not going to name any, but there's been countless numbers. Even the ABC, well, that's one I'll name. There's been countless numbers now. They don't go out deliberately to steal money from their employees. They have stuffed it up. The reputational damage is not something they would contemplate for a moment. The risk isn't worth it. So they didn't go out to steal. They stuffed it up. And these politicians we have today are not fixing the problem. And we need to fix the problem.
You talk about 20% flat tax, and of course a lot of people will say, particularly on the left, will say, well, that's going to be reward the rich. You are saying that the threshold of zero tax is going to go up to 40,000. I think what people forget is that a percentage in itself is a scale, right?
A percentage is a
so
percentage.
when we talk about, it's not really flat tax. Flat tax would be everybody pays $50,000 for their government services.
Clive Palmer's going to pay 20% of a lot more than extensive royalties, which is great for the sort of the citizens of Australia.
Yeah.
By the way, there's another aspect to this as well, which we're talking about, which is for middle Australia, and it's this that. People may not really notice these days, but they should, that on the one hand they're paying quite high rates of marginal tax. They might be, heading towards the 40 cents brackets, right? So the government takes that tax away from them, but it says, hey, aren't we great? Have an allowance, have this benefit. It's nonsense.
Yeah.
What we're saying is end all that, cut people's tax, and then ensure that they have the money up front and they make decisions about how they look after their families.
That's it. It's who makes the decisions. And, the point I was going to make about the 20% tax and taking it off the rich, it's basically all you're doing when you're taxing the rich is saying you don't get to choose how you're going to invest that surplus, right? You've made this extra profit. Instead of you, the business person who knows the business, who's put in the hard yards, who's had the learnings and the hard knocks, and instead of having thousands of those sorts of Australians with this cash in their hands to decide and make decisions on how they're going to invest it, we're going to come along as the government, take that away from you because we think we know how to spend it better. We've got little bureaucrats sitting in rooms who'll come up with ways to redistribute that or spend it, and that dumbs down, I think, the use of capital in a country.
It dumbs down the use of capital, but it dumbs down an infant. I always get this wrong. It makes infants, so it's easy to say it that way, it makes infants of everyday Australians. It's like they're stuck on the government sort of teeth. They think the government is their great benefactor. And that's as Reagan said, the problem is too much government.
So, that's right. The government's not the answer to the problem. Government is the problem. Just in terms of the the rate of tax. If we lower it, that's going to have a tremendous stimulatory effect.
That's the point,
isn't it? Right?
There's a
instead of the handouts, which is what this is. This is handouts.
Well, we've got a number of economists of quite some note, professional ability and recognition. Particularly our party president, Dr. John Humphreys, and there's a concept called the Laffer curve, which has been around for some years, which basically says there's an optimum level of taxation where if you tax at a certain level, you maximise the revenue to government, but if you go higher than that, because of the disincentives you put in,
you actually
revenue starts to decline. And our view in the Liberal Democrats is that we've exceeded the Laffer maximum sort of thing, and we're actually seeing declining income to government. If we drop the tax rate, we'll stimulate activity, it will reward entrepreneurship, will reward people for having a go, and actually government will ultimately get more in the way of tax revenue.
Yeah, yep.
Counterintuitive, but it sort of makes sense
as well
if you really think about it.
Well, they have studied, I think it's 17% or something, or around that 20% mark. And I think that's why, Singapore has a flat tax of 20%, Hong Kong has a flat tax of 16%. And these are very prosperous economies.
I don't know if Australians get that we really are a very highly taxed country now. Because
so is America.
All
the indirect taxes.
The thing is, so many people of fairly modest means are actually going into the higher tax brackets. And
there's a bracket creep.
A racket. Oh my, Freudian slip. Because we don't. What happens is government does not index those tax brackets.
No.
So what happens is that through what's called bracket creep, people go into higher tax brackets and they're being taxed more. And then the trick that these guys pull, Damian, is they go, we're giving you a tax cut, and it's really trying to restore position from before. But again, it's a sleight of hand. It's a pea and thimble trip trick that they pull on the voters.
But this is where
So
we
we're
are,
saying,
right?
We're saying that threshold of 40,000
Yeah.
should be indexed by the CPI.
Yeah.
So that's set in concrete.
Okay.
And
that's the inflation rate. So
yeah,
you tie it to the inflation
that
rate.
40,000 tax-free
Yep.
threshold would
Will
go
go
up
up.
with inflation.
So the bracket won't creep.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So, I mean, this is the problem is, and I see this sort of idea of incentive and reward here for politicians, right? When you talk about things like that, going out and saying, "Look, we're giving you a tax break," we lack the media rigor in this country to sort of tear that stuff apart properly. And I know the media are overloaded, and information explosion. How hard it is being a journalist these days.
No excuse, mate.
Okay,
They've all done degrees.
I'm trying to be a bit sympathetic to my former colleagues.
I'm not. They have done a woeful job in the last 2 years. They have been
around COVID, it's been appalling.
At their worst, they have been arms of government, the propaganda arm of government, particularly in Victoria. At their best, they have served up, simplistic, one-dimensional views of what's going on and alternatives. And frankly, I'm sick and tired of them branding people who are promoting free choice and what a democracy means, branding those people who might have been vaccinated as anti-vaxxers. I mean, that's just preposterous, and shame on them.
We're not seeing a fair and balanced analysis of this. I mean, there are people out there who can't be vaccinated. There are people with autoimmune conditions who are concerned about the reactions they might have. And it's not for any other person. It's not for me as a vaccinated person or you as a vaccinated person to say, well, you have to be vaccinated because I say so, when I can't find the science that says there is a massive collective benefit or a significant enough collective benefit to warrant this mandating and coercion to the point of mandating, which is what it is.
It doesn't, on so many levels, it doesn't make sense, because we know that a person who's been vaccinated can carry the virus. Indeed, I saw an article again today that said, I think it was Nick Cater writing in The Australian today, actually, who's making the point there's now research that says that a vaccinated person has a higher probability of giving you COVID than an unvaccinated person. And I went, oh, how's that? This is the interesting thing. It's because the study that was done overseas found that those who were vaccinated actually didn't get really very sick or sick at all. So they didn't know they had it. So they went to their workplace and gave it to people. If it was the case that you were vaccinated and you couldn't be a carrier, then there's a much stronger argument for mandates. Given that's not the case, the argument goes away. And let me tell you, by the way, I know of a sad case. I've got to be careful about how I explain this, but I know of a family where the husband had his second Pfizer shot. 3 weeks afterwards, he had a stroke. Another 2 or 3 weeks went by after him being in intensive care, and he then died. And I would say that to those who call people who are then worried about vaccines, call them stupid or ignorant, like Bob Carr or even Graham Richardson on Sky News the other day, think again. Just put yourself in the position of his widow, who has children now to look after, who then if that woman then is being told, well, you've now got to get a booster, otherwise you're not complying with the vaccine mandate. What's her position after that experience? There's got to be a suspicion. It could be wrong. How dare people, call people who are worried about it names and insist, if I'm vaccinated, my decision, I have protection. I don't care if you're unvaccinated right now, Damian. I don't care. What's that to me? I've got my protection. What am I worried about?
But there does seem to be a whole sort of ideological undercurrent here, right?
Yeah,
it's just,
it's appalling.
You're an anti-vaxxer, so you're far right wing, you're an anti-vaxxer, and you're not, you're stupid, and it's just...
So back to this mob.
Yeah.
The boss, the Prime Minister, says it's not compulsory. So why won't he speak? More importantly, why won't he act? Why won't he shut down these states? He says you don't have to get vaccinated. It's not compulsory. There is no mandate, but he's allowing the states to do it.
Yeah.
And people, again, like the Trevor Evans of this world, or the Julian Simmons, and the reason I say that is do not let off the hook these people. Yes, Anastasia Palaszczuk in Queensland is requiring this mandate, which is seeing nurses having to leave the health system, which they've served for many years, and police officers. But don't let the coalition off the hook. They have to speak up. They've got to do something about this. Why won't they back Craig Kelly and his bill? They've got a couple of people who've taken a principled stand. Senator Gerard Rennick, Senator Antic, who are saying they won't cooperate and give their vote to pass legislation until the Prime Minister deals with this. Good on them, I say. Well done.
Campbell Newman, the Senate candidate in the state of Queensland for the Lib Dems, the Liberal Democrats, looking more and more every day like the only true Liberal Party we have in this country. We will have part 2 of my interview with Mr. Newman next week on the show. We'll see you then. Okay, well, a bit of news from us now. The Other Side will be sadly leaving the Discernible platform at the end of 2021 and returning in 2022 on our own platforms, as well as with a bit of a big announcement that we can't talk about just yet. So right now, please follow me on Twitter at OtherSideOz. That's at OtherSideOz, AUS, and or on Facebook at facebook.com/TheOtherSideOz, AUS. So The Other Side Oz on Facebook. Now, you can also just search us up on Facebook, but make sure you put in The Other Side and Australia, or The Other Side and Damian Coory. And Coory spelled C-O-O-R-Y. Then be sure, once you get there, to click follow on Twitter to follow us, so you make sure that you will see us. And also, when you get to Facebook, make sure that you click the like button to like the page so that you get information. The Facebook page looks like what you're seeing on the screen right now. Now, we do strongly recommend that you continue to follow Discernible, of course, on YouTube and Facebook. But if you're landing on a page that says Discernible and you're looking for The Other Side, it isn't our own separate page. So you have got to find our separate pages to be sure that you stay in contact with us after the end of 2021. Then if you could kindly subscribe to us also on YouTube. Our YouTube page looks like this. And again, you'll need to find our page, not our folder on Discernible's page, and make sure that you subscribe to our page and click the bell so that you get notified when we put up new content. We really look forward to keeping in touch throughout 2022. And don't forget that you can always join our VIP WhatsApp list and have the show link sent to your phone every week. Just drop us an email at theothersideost@gmail.com, theothersideost with a T @gmail.com, and we'll send you the link to opt in on WhatsApp. Right, very important that we stay in touch throughout 2022 because we will be having a big announcement when we return in late January. But we'll be doing shows right through until the end of December, right here on Discernible and the Other Side platforms.